I discovered something everybody already knows but nobody talks about, and I honestly don't know why. Anybody who's driven one of these knows it doesn't hold a candle to the cars my grandfather used to own. I'm talking about a car that's uncomfortable, stiff as a board, a pain to maintain, and if you get in an accident, it crumples like cardboard. Nothing like those American cars from the 60s and 70s, which felt like actual tanks. I'm talking to you about the car that took first place on this ranking of cars that are worse than what my grandfather drove in the 60s and 70s. And it's not the only one. We've put together a list of 9 cars on the market today that I wouldn't trade for my grandfather's cars, not for anything. I've been fixing cars for over 20 years, out of a small shop here in the United States. I've torn down V8 engines from cars built in the 60s. I've replaced the clutch on a car my grandfather bought brand new off the lot. And these days I pop the hood on a new car and sometimes I don't even know where to start. Not because I got dumber, because they hid everything in there on purpose. If you're a fan of a specific brand, relax. Nobody here is going after the badge on the front of your car. We're talking about engineering decisions that repeat across pretty much every manufacturer you look at closely. These 9 modern cars on the list, all sold here in the United States, are, in my opinion and in the opinion of a lot of people who come through my shop, basically an insult compared to what we used to drive 50 years ago. Stick around till the end because the number 1 car on this list is the most expensive of the 9, and it's exactly the one I'd trust the least to take my family on a long road trip. That shouldn't be possible in a car that costs what this one costs, but that's exactly what we're about to find out together. Quick heads up before we get into it. This channel doesn't take money from any automaker. Nobody's sending us press cars, nobody's buying ad space to soften what we say, and we don't sell cars. What you're getting comes straight from public repair cost and reliability data, and we'll show you exactly where every number comes from. One favor, doesn't cost you a thing. Hit subscribe before we keep going. It's the kind of 5-second habit that could stop someone you know from overpaying for a car that doesn't even give them the benefits of an old one. Let's get into the list. Number 9, and this one already stings, Toyota RAV4. This car has a bumper that cracks if you tap it a little too hard pulling into a parking spot. It doesn't dent, it cracks, because it's not real metal anymore. It's reinforced plastic with foam inside, designed to be swapped out whole instead of hammered back into shape like they used to do. That's great if you sell replacement parts. It's terrible for your wallet. A repair that used to mean a hammer and a coat of paint now means a whole new part, because it wasn't built to be repaired, it was built to be replaced. And here's the worst part. The old American car could take a parking lot bump and you wouldn't even notice the next day. This one turns into an insurance claim. I've lost count of how many customers have come into my shop with a scratch so small it's basically nothing, and walked out with a $1,000 estimate just because the bumper can't be partially repaired. Back in the day, you'd pull out a dent with a suction cup and a little heat. Now if it's cracked, it's a new part, new paint, and sometimes even a built-in parking sensor that needs to be recalibrated afterward. What used to be a Saturday morning job turned into a 2-week wait for an imported part. And I'm not exaggerating. Just last week, a customer backed into a low parking bollard, slowly, barely felt the impact inside the car. When he got out to look, the bumper had a crack almost a foot long. He was furious because in his old car, which he sold a few years back, he'd backed into a fence way harder than that and it didn't even scratch. The difference isn't the driver. It's the material. And when I ran the actual numbers, real shop estimates, we're talking anywhere from $885 to $1,389 just to replace that one bumper cover, for a crack you could barely see. Number 8. This one's about the engine nobody can see anymore. Chevrolet Equinox. You pop the hood these days on that redesigned newer generation, and what you see is a plastic cover over a small turbocharged engine crammed into a bay that clearly wasn't built with a mechanic in mind, with the brand logo stamped nice and neat. They're just to look tidy when the car goes up for resale. Underneath that, the components are packed in so tight that swapping a spark plug, a 10-minute job 30 or 40 years ago, has turned into a 2 or 3 hour job on some models because you have to take part of the engine apart just to reach it. That's not sophistication. That's engineering designed to push you back to the dealership, because no small neighborhood shop wants to burn a whole afternoon on it, and the part itself is priced like a dealership part. I have a customer who swears the engine in his old car was like an open book. You'd look at it and know exactly where every belt, every hose, every bolt was. In his new car, he told me once, laughing, that it looks like he popped the hood and found a shoebox full of wires. And he's not wrong. Modern engines are compact, they're efficient, but they're also hostile to anyone who just wants to understand their own car. That shows up directly in the bill the owner pays. A simple job, like replacing the 12-volt battery, 2 bolts on the old car, now on some models means pulling part of the inner fender liner, or even taking apart a piece of the dashboard, because they tuck the battery into some impossible corner to free up space somewhere else in the car. I've built battery replacement jobs that took longer than a full oil change, just because the access was made bad on purpose. Number 7. This is, in my opinion, the clearest example of style-beating function, Nissan Murano. It's got a roofline that swoops down in a nice curve in the back, looks like it's straight out of a fashion magazine. Except that pretty design steals a huge amount of rear headroom, and between the small, raked-back window and a C-pillar so thick you could lose a mailbox behind it, seeing through the rearview mirror at night has become an act of faith. It's not just my opinion either. Independent visibility testing has flagged this generation for some of the worst documented rear sightlines in its class. American cars from the 60s and 70s had big glass all around because the idea was for you to see the road, not to look stylish parked in a mall lot. Today it's the opposite. Design wins over visibility, and that's a safety problem dressed up as an aesthetic choice. You know what really gets me about this particular car? The automakers know it too, which is why they load the car with cameras and sensors to make up for what the driver can no longer see with their own eyes. Except a camera covered in snow or a sensor iced over just stops working, and then you're left without the natural visibility the design took away, and without the technology that was supposed to replace it. I live somewhere where snow in the winter is just routine, and every year it's the same scene in my shop. A customer comes in complaining the backup camera stopped working, and most of the time it's not even electrical, it's just ice or mud stuck on the lens. In the old car, you wiped the rear window with a rag, and you were good, because you saw straight through, no middleman between your eyes and the road. Now the driver depends on a screen that depends on a lens that depends on the weather cooperating. Number 6. This is the part that bugs me most as a mechanic. Ford Explorer. This is one of the models I hear about most in lemon law complaints, and it's almost always the same story. Electrical gremlins and module failures that come back again and again, even after multiple trips to the dealership. This car has more than 30 different electronic modules controlling things that, technically, never needed electronics in the first place. Door locks, seat adjustment, even the parking brake became an electronic button instead of a real lever. And the problem isn't the technology itself, it's that when one of these modules glitches, sometimes the whole car goes into a safe mode and you're stranded on the highway because of a $50 sensor. In an old car, if a door lock jammed, you'd fix it with a screwdriver. Today, without the right module working, you simply don't go anywhere. I had a case in my shop where an electronic parking brake locked itself in the middle of a parking garage ramp in the middle of the night because the 12-volt battery, the small one, the one that's almost hidden, was weak. Not the big car battery, the little one. The owner was literally stuck inside his own car until the tow truck showed up. With a regular handbrake, that never would have happened. And the worst part is, these modules talk to each other, so sometimes the fault isn't even in the system showing the problem. It's some module way off sending bad data to 10 other modules, and the whole car thinks something serious is happening when it isn't. I once spent a whole afternoon just tracking down which of 30 modules was triggering a false airbag warning in a car that had absolutely nothing wrong with the actual airbag. In my grandfather's car, every system was isolated. If the radio broke, the rest of the car had no idea it even existed. Number 5. This one's about what happened to the metal. Ford F-15. Oh, the body panels on this truck are aluminum, not steel like on any American car my grandfather owned, and they're noticeably thinner and softer to boot. That's intentional. It's to make the vehicle lighter and hit fuel economy targets. But it also means a hit that used to leave just a dent, now buckles the whole door panel. I've seen hailstorms, just hail, leave a new truck looking like it went through a serious wreck, while the old car parked right next to it came out practically untouched. That's not a coincidence. It's an engineering choice, and nobody tells you that when you're buying. And it's not just hail. A shopping cart bumping into the door by accident now leaves a visible mark that used to go unnoticed. Insurance companies know this too, which is why the cost of repairing minor collisions keeps climbing year after year, even in small fender benders that, in my grandfather's car, would barely have left a mark. I like to do a little test when a customer doesn't believe me. I knock on the door of a new car with my knuckle, then do the same thing on a classic car that's sometimes here in the shop for a restoration. The sound is already different. The new truck makes a hollow, tinny sound, like you're knocking on an empty soda can. The old car answers back thick and heavy, solid. That's not just a feeling. That's the real difference between old school steel and the aluminum panels on this thing today. Number 4. Here's the stat I most like to bring up, because it's genuinely shocking. Hyundai Tucson. According to data from insurance companies in the United States, some recent models have shown the automatic emergency braking system engaging on its own by mistake, slamming the brakes for an obstacle that isn't really there, which has actually caused low-speed collisions instead of preventing them. It's not that the car is inherently dangerous, it's that the system doesn't always deliver on what it promises, in either direction, whether it's failing to brake when it should or braking hard when it shouldn't. Old cars didn't give you that margin for error. You knew that if you weren't paying attention, the car wasn't going to save you. In a strange way, that made drivers pay closer attention to the road. I'm not saying safety tech is bad, far from it. It saves a lot of lives when it works well. But when it works poorly, or when the driver trusts it too much and stops really paying attention, it creates a type of accident that simply didn't exist before. And that's a cost nobody factors in when they're buying. I see this play out constantly. Customers come into the shop thinking the car will brake itself in any situation, because that's what the sign at the dealership implied. But these systems have limits. Heavy rain, low sun hitting the camera, dust on a dirt road, any of that can make the system simply fail to see the obstacle in time. And the driver, who spent months blindly trusting it, never developed the reflex to brake on their own the way drivers used to, because they never had to. Number 3. This one's about the interior. Jeep Wrangler. Almost everything in there is hard plastic, from the dashboard to the center console. And after a few years in strong sun, especially in hotter states, that plastic starts cracking, fading white, and even crumbling in spots. American cars from the 60s and 70s had chrome trim, thick vinyl, real wood in some of the pricier models. They aged too, sure, but they aged with a bit of dignity. This one, after 7 or 8 years of strong sun, looks beat up even when it's been well taken care of the whole time. I've got a customer who keeps his truck in the garage, waxes it, babies it like it's his kid, and the dash still cracks in the exact same spot everybody complains about on this model. That's not the owner's fault. It's cheap material chosen on purpose to cut production costs, sold to the customer as if it were modern finishing. And it's not just me saying it. This exact cracking issue has been a recurring, documented complaint in owner forums for years, and it's shown up in independent reliability write-ups too. And the worst part is, when you try to fix it, most of the time you can't just replace the cracked piece. The whole console is molded as one giant piece, so one small crack in a corner forces you to replace the entire panel, every button, every fitting, all of it together. In my grandfather's car, if a button broke, you bought just that button at an auto parts store for a fraction of the price and swapped it yourself in 5 minutes. Number 2. Almost there, and this one's about a problem most owners only discover too late. Tesla Model Y. This car's infotainment system basically runs a full computer with an operating system, software updates, all of it. And like any computer, it becomes outdated. Within a few years, the navigation map stops updating, some apps stop working, and replacing that whole screen can cost as much as an entire used car in some cases. Old cars had a radio. Radio broke, you replaced it for a few bucks at an auto parts store. Today, a software problem can cost you thousands of dollars to fix. And the worst part is, unlike a phone, you can't just buy a new one and transfer your data. The system is soldered into the dashboard. So when it freezes, crashes, or just stops recognizing your phone over Bluetooth, there's not much you can do besides wait for an update the automaker may or may not release, depending on how much longer they want to keep investing in that model. I had a customer who bought his car used, with 4 years on it, and found out, too late, that the automaker had simply stopped supporting that generation of software. No updates, no bug fixes, nothing. His navigation would freeze on its own in the middle of a trip, and the only fix the dealership offered was replacing the entire unit for almost $2,000 on a car he'd bought used for barely more than that difference. My grandfather's car, the radio never went unsupported. A broken radio is a broken radio, you fix it in an afternoon. And now, number 1. This is the most expensive car on the whole list, and ironically, the one I'd trust the least to run smoothly for the next 20 years without major headaches, Tesla Cybertruck. It rolls together almost every problem we've talked about so far, all at once. An overload of electronics, an interior that doesn't age well, and on top of that, its own headline-making issue. There are real, documented cases of body panels coming loose and flying off this thing on the highway, at speeds over 70 miles an hour. Except, unlike the other 8, this one is sold as the top of the line, as the car that represents the cutting edge of American manufacturing today. And that's exactly what bothers me. Because my grandfather's car, built with thick steel, a simple engine anybody could look at and work on with a regular wrench, and an interior that survived generation after generation of kids jumping around in the back seat, cost a fraction of what this one costs. And still, a lot of people I talk to in the shop agree with me on one thing. If you had to bet on which of the two would still be running well 30 years from now, you would not bet on this modern car. Not a chance. I've even made it a running joke here in the shop with the other mechanics. We call this kind of vehicle a subscription car because that's basically what it's become in practice. You pay a fortune to buy it, and then you keep paying month after month, year after year, in software updates, dealership parts, electronic diagnostics that only their computer can run properly. My grandfather's car, you bought once, took care of it, and it was truly yours, without depending on anybody else to keep working. There's another detail few people notice, one I only picked up on after years of seeing this particular car come through my shop. Its depreciation is brutal, precisely because of everything we just talked about. Once a used car buyer understands that the electronic modules are expensive, that the engine is hard to access, that the plastic cracks, the resale value drops a lot faster than it ever did on my grandfather's car. So you pay the higher price going in, and then you lose value faster on the way out. It's a loss on both ends. That doesn't mean old cars are always better. It doesn't mean every new piece of technology is bad either. It means one thing. Somewhere between my grandfather's car and today's car, the industry traded durability for sophistication and traded ease of repair for dependence on the dealership. And that completely changed what it means to own a car in this country. Now, before we wrap up, let me tell you one last thing I notice all the time in my shop. The people who complain to me the most about these modern cars aren't the ones who hate technology. They're the ones who trusted it too much. They bought thinking they were paying for peace of mind, and found out 2 or 3 years later that they were paying for dependence. Dependence on the dealership, dependence on software, dependence on an imported part that takes weeks to arrive. My grandfather's car never left you dependent on anybody. You, a wrench, and a little patience could solve almost any problem over the weekend in your own garage. And if you think I'm exaggerating, let me tell you something I see almost every week. A customer comes into the shop with a $60,000 or $70,000 car, complaining about something that, deep down, is minor. A sensor. A warning light on with no explanation. And I hook up the diagnostic computer, and sometimes even the system itself can't tell me for sure what's wrong, just that something is out of spec. In my grandfather's car, that simply didn't exist. Either the car ran, or there was a noise or a smell that told you exactly where to look. I don't want you walking away from this thinking I hate new cars. I don't. I use good technology every single day in my shop, and it saves time, saves money, sometimes saves lives. What I want is for you to buy with your eyes open. To know that pretty design, that big screen, that finish that looks like it's straight out of a spaceship, comes with a hidden cost nobody mentions at the point of sale. And that sometimes that simple, ugly, noisy car your grandfather drove is still going to be running long after this one's turned into scrap from one too many failed electronic modules. If you're thinking about buying a new car anyway, even after hearing all this, let me give you one quick, practical piece of advice from a mechanic, not a salesman. Before you sign anything, ask about 3 things nobody ever asks at the dealership. Ask how much it costs to replace the front bumper out of warranty. Ask if the car has any recall history tied to an electronic module. And ask, without any embarrassment, how long that generation of software has been receiving updates from the manufacturer. If the salesperson stumbles on any of those 3 questions, that tells you a lot about what you're about to buy. And one more thing I always tell my customers, especially the younger ones who never had an old car to compare against. Go to a classic car show, just once, even if it's only to walk around. Pop the hood on a car from the 60s or 70s and take a good look. Not because you're going to buy one, most people wouldn't even have the nerve to drive one without today's safety features in today's traffic, but because it gives you a real sense of what we lost along the way and what we gained too, so you can see both sides more clearly when it's time to decide what actually matters to you. At the end of the day, this whole list isn't about hating technology or wanting to go back to the past. It's about understanding that every advance comes with a hidden trade-off, and nobody in the showroom is going to tell you what that trade-off is before you sign the contract. That job fell to us here, straight up, no filter. Which of these 9 have you owned or driven, and do you agree or disagree with me? Let me know in the comments because I read every one of them. And honestly, I love it when someone proves me wrong with a real story. If you've got an old car tucked away somewhere, or if you inherited your grandfather's car and it's still running like a dream, tell me about that too. because those stories make me a lot happier than any insurance statistic ever could. And if any of these 9 points hit close to home with something you've experienced, whether it's your own car, a friend's, or a relative's, write it in the comments. I've actually thought about doing a follow-up video just responding to the most interesting comments on this one, so the more detailed your story, the better your chances of showing up in the next video. And if you're into this kind of straight talk comparison, no fluff, subscribe to the channel because every week we bring you a new list just like this one. Always the real deal, no sugarcoating, nobody paying me to talk up their brand. Thanks for sticking around with me, and I'll see you in the next video.